Next curve.
Welcome to this Next Curve Rethink podcast episode where we break down the latest tech and industry events and incidents as well into the insights that matter. And I'm Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst at Next Curve, joined by the infamous, can I call you infamous, Dylan?
Sure. Notorious B.I.G.
You're notorious. You are the notorious Dylan Patel, Chief Analyst and founder of SemiAnalysis, to catch up because, I haven't seen you in a while, actually. And to talk about the so-called Blackwell delay that everyone was talking about last week, but hopefully Dylan, who he and his team put out a really great report over the last weekend that clarifies things, at least adds a hell of a lot of color. And Dylan's here to talk about that study and hopefully get you interested in not only SemiAnalysis but that report as well. So, welcome, Dylan.
Hello. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It looks like you're in some interesting. I mean, you're a world traveler, right? Quite literally, constantly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just in a hotel right now in New Orleans because I'm here for an engagement for the weekend. So just working from the hotel.
Okay, now I'm looking at your frame right now, your video, and I'm noticing this gigantic mic. Do you actually carry that around with you, or did you rent it just for the show?
Small.
Yeah,
it's quite small. But yeah, Ben Thompson said he was tired of me being on stuff without a microphone. So when he had me come on his podcast, he bought a microphone specifically for me and said, "You must use this everywhere." Okay. And I'm like, "Okay, I will." So that's kind of funny. But yeah, great. Ben Thompson gave me this microphone, and it's small enough, and he knew this. He's like cognizant. He's like, this is small enough that you can take it with you when you travel.
Okay. Well, I have an Apogee. I could have basically just given it to you because I bought a new one. It works great, by the way. A lot smaller than the one that you have right there. But anyways, you sound great. That's all that counts.
Well, it's also a perspective thing, right? Like, like that.
Yeah,
that small.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so before we get started, remember to like, share, and comment on this episode, and subscribe to the Rethink podcast here on YouTube and on Buzzsprout to take us on the road and on your jog and to New Orleans. And you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platform, and you can find us there as well. So with that, hey, let's jump into this, Dylan. I'm looking forward to this because I consider you one of the young guns of silicon, and I tried to put our good friend Ian Cutress into that bucket, but he told me he's not that young. I don't believe that, but you're one of the.
Well, I think he's exactly 9 years older than me, but I think he's still young. He's young at heart.
Too. I know I'm old, and I know that you guys are a lot younger than I am. So, but I feel privileged, Dylan, truly, because I'm like this old guy, and I have a young guy, a new young gun, who doesn't mind being on an old guy's show. So I really appreciate it, Dylan. And I'm looking forward.
Well, it's because you're such a nice person, right? That's the nice.
Yeah, that's right. You always just show up on nice people's podcasts, right?
Yes, I do. In fact, I do. I'm pretty nice. As long as I have time.
You are. You're great in person. So, let's do a little bit of retrospective here. So, about a little over a year last year, you and I had a moment to hang out over at SemiCon West 2023, right? And at that time, I gave you a challenge. I gave you an opportunity, 1 minute, to roast me, right? Do you recall that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that actually kind of went viral. That was kind of cool. But you instead of roasting me, actually dropped some truth bombs during your little rant there. And what you had said, that we are going to be using generative AI so that I can generate a email that I can send to you, burn all these tokens and generate all these tokens, waste all this energy so that you on the other side can use generative AI to summarize it. And, hey, that's the future of generative AI. So has your thinking changed?
No, I mean, I was mostly being facetious. I think
know.
there's a lot more that you can do with generative AI, but that is one of the use cases that people tend to use. And so, like, actually, in my life, I try to do things in a way where it's impossible to have been generative AI. Right. Things such as really writing really shorthanded, indirect emails with direct emails with typos that are slightly rude. Right. Then, for sure it didn't come from a GPT. Right. It came from me, came from my heart. That rude, doesn't care about my spelling format. Right. But I think generative AI, the applications that are being developed for continue to explode in capabilities. Of course, like all of these things are still, proof of concept or just started getting released into the market. Then the question of like, hey, how much is actually working versus how much will come is very much a lot to come still. And these applications range all over the place, right? It's not just emails and summarization, right? I think that's that's like the least imaginative view. There's significantly more use cases, all the way from programming to data cleaning to assistance, customer service, all sorts of different applications that both in directly interacting with humans as well as in the background, right? To summarizing, synthesizing, creating, and all sorts of information, right? And making that loop and feedback loop much faster.
Well, I'll tell you this, Dylan. I don't think summarization is all that trivial. Of course, it's always a question of reliability, and that's one of the things. Since we last talked, I'm just harping on reliability. How do you develop these models, train them in a way where they're actually reliable for what the intended use is? And that tends to become increasingly more targeted, just because when you go broad in general, that's where you start to lose the handle on reliability. But then at the application level, how do you channel it and place it within the architecture of that application so that it's useful, right? And I think that's really where, if you're looking beyond just all the R&D that's happening or experimentation that's happening with the models, the technology, all the way down to the silicon, that's the big frontier that everyone's trying to get to and figure out. That's what I've been taking out of the research and the engagement I've had with the industry and many of the same companies that you and I talked to over the past year or so. But it's good feedback. So now let's talk specifically about the state of what I call Gen AI supercomputing, because I want to get your take on this, because everyone talks about AI, right? And oftentimes when I get in conversations, people talk about mention AI. I always ask them, what do you mean, right? But one of the things that we're looking at that's been very, very exciting, I think, is the way you can call it beyond just ChatGPT, is Gen AI supercomputing, which I think is a different breed of supercomputing. I don't know if you agree with that or not. Love your perspective on that, but what's your reaction to that? But then also, what's got you excited over the past year since we last had the roasting opportunity?
I could riff for sure, but
riff away, just riff away, do your thing.
All right, folks. So we're now on my podcast, and my where I want to go with this is I want to query the audience, right? The audience of one, which is Leonard, the live audience. I want laugh tracks, by the way, in the background.
Okay, you'll get that.
But I think that in infrastructure, people are making a variety of choices and decisions, but many of them and many companies that we know quite well are pushing solutions that maybe onto enterprises and others that maybe are not like that important or useful, right? So the question is like, hey, like this low-end GPU or this low-end AI accelerator or this AI laptop, what is the use case for it?
Yeah.
And where is it going to go in a few years? Well, today the use cases are nonsense, right? It's generating an image in 25 seconds that you can get in the cloud in 5. It's summarizing something with very low accuracy and much slower time period than you can get in the cloud for free, right? With either Meta AI or OpenAI's free ChatGPT or Google's free Gemini, or et cetera, right? So there's significant differences in sort of where what people can do and what people are pushing, right? So for example, that hey, AI laptops, right? This hardware is not capable of running anything good. There's no use case today, but at the same time, people are like, no, you must buy an AI PC because it's forward looking. But then that puts no attention to what comes out of, today it doesn't even run the leading edge applications. Now skip forward a couple of years. Is that hardware still flexible? Or did you make a purchase that is basically just a normal laptop that's got good marketing and maybe questionable marketing and like overinflated pricing, right? And that's what I see like a lot of happening in both the infrastructure space of like of servers, right? People buying servers that are being told to buy servers that are not going to be able to be functional or useful in a few years, right? They're useful, I guess, today for the smaller models, but what are they going to be useful for in 3-4 years? Those smaller models going to look architecturally that way? Probably not. They continue to advance rapidly. And people want to learn run the larger models, which are much more reliable and better than the smaller ones. Or maybe there's a new algorithm and the current chips, are not very well suited for that, right? ASICs or whatnot, right? Or low-end GPUs. So I think a lot of the like stuff I see decisions people are making today are just like, we must do it now, instead of like, how can I intelligently prepare my infrastructure across my corporation in both, mobile computing all the way through to server computing, to where I'm not like just hemming myself into like this cost that either I'm like depreciating over many years, or even I've taken a loan out, or I've signed a cloud contract for many years on hardware that's not useful, right? Long term, right? And it's just an expensive, overspend. So I think that's the thing that like I think you just don't get.
Yeah. I like your show, by the way. When you make it your podcast, it makes for some pretty good perspective. No, this is really interesting. So you're not a big fan of edge AI, quote unquote, edge AI then, right?
I think I'm a certain type.
Or generative AI. Let's call it generative, because, there's a lot of AI that works really great across all kinds of edges. Okay. That's why, see, this is the thing, Dylan. This is why I've been using GenAI supercomputing, not supercomputing, right? Like making the distinction between, let's say, the generative AI supercomputing that we're seeing. So all the slideware that Jensen Huang shows, right? Huang's curve, all this stuff that transcends what we traditionally or previously saw in supercomputing before. That, the way I look at it, they're kind of like two different conversations, although they're related. But when we look at the kind of supercomputers and these large, accelerated computing data centers, you're looking at compute infrastructure that caters to a very different AI workload, right? Whether it's for training or for inference.
Yeah, I would say generally, like, first things first is supercomputers have never made money. Never will and never have, right?
Oh, come on.
Look, I think, okay, like there have been a number of like oil supercomputers in the top 500 and those have made money, right? But the vast majority of the supercomputers on the, in the world do not make money, right? And they're generally funded by governments and such, right? And specifically talking about like top 10, top 20 level, right? Once you get out further, it makes, there's a bit more sense on the engineering, services and all these kinds of things. But supercomputers have generally not made money. Now, when you look at, with AI, right, people are rushing to build these AI supercomputers, and not only are they large, they're larger than the government scale supercomputers, right? In the case of for example, El Capitan or Frontier or Aurora, these supercomputers that the U.S. has made and many other countries of their own, right? They're in the hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion, right? But today we see, each of the hyperscalers making not just $1 billion supercomputer. That's boring, right? They're making a $10 billion supercomputer, and they're planning to make a $100 billion supercomputer, right? And so this is the sort of, I think, like big impasse of like, will these supercomputers, defy the history and be profitable in some way by making something that is supremely, profitable? I.e., the biggest computer in the world, a rapidly depreciating asset, right? Are they going to be able to create something useful with it, or are they going to be able? Are they just going to have, follow the path of humanity, which is like big computers are useful, especially for research, but they don't make money, right? So that's sort of like the question here. That's kind of an impasse in my view.
No one's asking that question, by the way. But it's like really weird. Maybe I should have you try to roast me more often, because I don't know if you're intentional. It sounds like it feels like you're more of like a unintentional genius, right? Some of the stuff that you're saying, I think, is totally valid.
But it was unintentional.
Honestly, I really didn't expect to hear this kind of stuff from you. It's like, it was just like the roasting. I thought you were really gonna let me have it, and then you just drop a bunch of Buddha bombs. It was like strange for me. Okay, truly.
I think you have to like cater to your crowd, right?
No, you don't. You don't. But actually,
all right, so you're on the Dylan Patel podcast. We're here to tell you why AI is going to change everything, and you should sell all of your possessions and put them in NVIDIA stock, because AI is going to...
No, you have to stop there. You have to stop there. We don't talk about stock prices and all that. We are pure tech, buddy. Okay, I know.
I know. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah. I know. I might have to cut that out. I won't, but
I'm obviously trolling, right? I think that.
Yeah. I know. Well, everyone who knows you knows your personality. So yeah, it's all good. A thumbs up here from my side. So no, I think tough questions, tough answers, right? I mean, that's me, right? I don't mess around. So this is all good stuff. But I'm just kind of surprised that these perspectives you're surfacing them just simply because you and your team are looking at the technology, the infrastructure, and the market in such I would call it deep and profound way. So, and you guys are recognized for that as well, right? So, I
mean, I think like, yeah, absolutely. Like, knowing the intricacies of all these build outs, why, how, et cetera, is important. But sort of the questions you're asking are not like, hey, what's the like network architecture of like this build out specifically and why, right? It's more, or like, what's the cost of this subcomponent and volume, right? It's more like, why, how.
Yeah, I mean,
it's more so.
I'm not down at the details like you guys are, but one of the things that I do try to address is helping people understand what's happening under the hood, right? And having friends like you, friends that we have in the industry, and our interactions together, our sharings. That's what informs a lot of. It's a good portion of how I develop my perspective on things, but then, obviously engagements with a lot of the vendors as well as the end users of these technologies. But no, it's all good stuff, Dylan. Don't get me wrong, okay, at all. What you're sharing is great. I'm just a bit surprised because you're bringing up another thing that I've been talking quite a lot about is this concern that I think a lot of end users should have, including hyperscalers, about this whole 1 year cadence thing and the velocity of what they're looking at. I mean, you were mentioning for the AI PC and edge AI applications, the hardware will, how quickly will its useful life for those use cases be? Will it be obsolete in 1-2 years, right? Same question is there for the hyperscalers as well, because if, there's this Huang's curve, right, that you're probably really familiar with, right? Don't tell me you don't know what it is.
Yeah, I know what it is. I know what it is.
Yeah. There's this Huang's curve, but it connotes a very high velocity of improvement in these systems that are becoming at end use, vendors. Hyperscalers as well as enterprises, and that we're looking at an accelerated, obsolescence cycle, right? And that's something that really begs the question: what is the appetite for that, and what kind of dynamic does that introduce into cloud economics overall? Because there's some folks that talk about, this is the era of cloud 2.0 and accelerated computing is going to change everything. Well, yeah, maybe it will. This is probably one of the things that will change the dynamics and economics of accelerated cloud computing. So I was pretty impressed or shocked that you kind of, I don't know if that's what you're trying to say, but you brought it up.
Yeah. I think it's important questions to ask. Of course, my view is, it's a different one, and we'll get into this, but
that's fine.
It's more of like an almost religious conviction, right? But I do think it's an important question to ask for some people. I think AI buildouts will happen at a religious pace and fervor, right? Like, really? So I think that's a little bit different. There is some economics to play.
So Huang's law, do you think it's going to hit a wall? I mean, I get it. I understand the bits and pieces of it and what's contributing to this curve that they always show at a lot of their events. But I'm dying to ask you this question: do you see a wall that everyone's going to bump into, whether it's AMD or Intel or whoever is playing this generative AI supercomputing scale out game?
Models will keep getting bigger and compute keeps getting bigger, but for the first time we've spawned a generation of people, we as in humanity has spawned a generation of people that believe in logarithms instead of linear, right? Mm-hmm. Because you and I will look at something and be like, that's twice as big, but 2x is not a order of magnitude, right? There's another group of people, mostly AI researchers and people who believe in the AI religion, myself to some degree, that believe that the scale is not 1 to 2, it's 1 to 10 to 100, right? It's not 1 to 2 to 4 to 8. And so that's sort of the sort of how do you count, right? And so the Huang's law is more of that 1 to 10 to 100 type of curve. Right. So obviously nothing in humanity has really grown at that pace. It's been exponential though, right? Humanity has been exponential in growth. It just hasn't been quite logarithmic, right?
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
So I think go ahead.
No, it's just, but for this logarithmic, oh my gosh, this feels like deja vu. It's weird. I feel like I've had this conversation before. But in order for this logarithmic curve to be sustained, what are those drivers? I assume that some of those drivers are the things that are cited as those factors that constitute or support Huang's law. But when I look at them, number one, still kind of bound by more quote unquote Moore's law, however you define or perceive that. But the progression of what you might perceive as transistor density and power efficiency, and then there's these other factors like the data precision and the complexity and these other factors that I don't know. When I do my own research, I can see that there could eventually be a slowing down in several of those factors. And what we're looking at right now is there was a lot of technologies, a lot of approaches that were thrown at a new problem, and that's where you're getting the perception of this logarithmic scaling.
Yeah, exactly. And so for AI, like, those first few algorithms were easy, right? Oh,
Yeah.
spending, going from, one, gaming GPU,
Yeah.
all the way, for a little bit of time, all the way out to, even GPT-4, right? A $500 million supercomputer for 3 months, right? These are reasonable amounts of money and timescales. But now as we move forward to 5, 6, 7, right? That logarithmic scale starts to get really like, the amount of money being spent doesn't just affect, hundreds or
Yeah.
thousands of people. It affects millions of people and maybe even
Yeah.
billions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that scale becomes really, really, potentially unsustainable, right? Especially with Moore's law slowing down, with all the challenges with regards to economically and societally with technology, right? There are stacking S curves, and Moore's law is maybe one of the biggest stacking S curves that humanity has ever seen. But now there's all sorts of other innovations coming in networking and optics and all these other things.
Yeah.
But certainly Moore's law, the core of it, has slowed down massively.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So cool. Now, why don't we jump onto probably the topic that everybody's really curious about is this Blackwell so-called delay. I'm going to put quotes around it because you might challenge that notion or you might support it. But you mind taking a moment to explain what it is and sort of the nature of it at a high level, and then why it will or may not matter?
Sure. So, NVIDIA's Blackwell architecture, new set of products, B100, B200, GB200, right? We're set to launch this year. We'll still launch this year, but it's a couple months delay in terms of shipment dates, and volume production is a little bit slower than they would have hoped. Certainly there are challenges on that front, right? Of what is, where they'll be able to sit in terms of volume production, and yields and all of these things. And so the challenge really for NVIDIA is getting high volume production in the timelines they wanted. No one has ever cared about a product launch quite as much as people care about Blackwell. So in the case of the silicon industry, right, we're used to, hey, this is a little bit later. Oh, it takes time, right? Once the product comes out, doesn't mean everyone's deploying it day one, right?
Sure.
You might, say Intel may release a new server CPU, and even if it's swimmingly great, which hasn't been a while for Intel with server CPU launches, it still takes a long time for that to ramp up in production. But NVIDIA, with Blackwell, and generally NVIDIA as a company, has always been much faster at ramping, right? When they release something, they want to ramp it really quickly. In the case of Blackwell, this is super fast, right? They finished the design, they taped it out, and they wanted to ramp it like less than a year later, right? Or a year later. And the challenge with that is, no one gets silicon perfect on the first try, or there's packaging challenges, or there's system level challenges, or there's firmware. There's all sorts of challenges that people generally run into. In this case, NVIDIA is using a brand new packaging technology called CoWoS-L, which has silicon bridges in an RDL interposer, versus previously they used CoWoS-S in a silicon interposer. And there are challenges with ramping this new process. Not to say like, and design and production are, and yield are all highly linked. You can't just like, they're not independent things, right? It's not a blame on just NVIDIA. It's not a blame just on TSMC. There's sort of, hey, what's the pace we want to move at? What were the engineering risks we wanted to take? I feel like they probably understood this well, but they thought they were doing well until, there was a, slight minor change that they need to do with the package, which delays the product ramp like slightly, right? So that does like, impact NVIDIA's ramp to a degree, right? And so then the question is, how much does this really change the product ramp, right? In the case of many customers, they were thinking,
and the
large customers thought that could get a bunch of GPUs this year. They'll still get some, right? But many smaller customers thought it was next year and still think it's next year, right? And NVIDIA is like doing a lot of changes, right? They're changing their roadmap. They're introducing new servers, all in reaction, sort of to these sorts of things.
Yeah. And speaking of new servers, you mentioned one in your your article or report, which everyone should go and subscribe to SemiAnalysis and check the report out. Even the well, yeah, I mean, it's very, very detailed. You mentioned a new SKU, basically, right? MGX, ring a bell?
Yeah. New SKU.
Yeah.
So NVIDIA's
GB200A, ring a bell.
yeah. No one's ever heard of that before, right? Up until just a week ago, right? Basically.
Yeah. So you mentioned it, I think, right? So
yeah. I mean, NVIDIA just presented it to customers, and customers are like, "What the like? What is There's no more B100. Depending on who you are, there's no more B200, right? Some people still have it, some people don't. So yeah, I think NVIDIA sort of like had to rework the roadmap massively right now. So that means introducing new products which they can manufacture more easily, people can deploy more easily, etc.
And there seemed that, having read the report in its entirety, believe it or not, you may or may not believe that, but you mentioned that this I don't know if you want to call it a stopgap solution or system is air cooled, right?
Yeah. So I wouldn't call it a stopgap, right? I think NVIDIA's initial plan was just quite aggressive for certain customers, right? So, they were going to release the existing, they were going to release Blackwell in the existing architecture of 8 GPUs, right? And that could be air cooled if you wanted it. And then they were going to release this liquid cooled rack, right? Yeah. And so sort of there's like a massive gap here, right, between where in what NVIDIA announced and wanted to ship to customers.
Sure.
Which is the only way you can get this like rack scale, NVLink across the whole rack is if you water cooled. But hey, like a lot of customers can't water cool, but at the same time, the 8 GPU server is not that much of a benefit, right? It's still better, right? Of course, it's still better, but it's not doesn't deliver the same improvements. So NVIDIA kind of had a gap where there's no rack scale architecture with air cooling, right? Until this MGX platform came about, right? Which now this MGX platform is easy to deploy for most data centers, right? It's still a 60 kilowatt rack, not a 12 kilowatt rack. So there's still, humongous increase in power density, but, this is something that most data centers can deploy, right? You don't need water cooling. But then you still get a lot of the benefits of rack scale architecture that NVIDIA has with the NVL72 instead of having to stick with just the 8 GPU server.
Yeah, but I mean, even for the hyperscalers, doesn't that throw a bit of a curveball? Because if you think about the build-outs that they've been doing, there's going to be a good portion of it that build out in anticipation of Blackwell, right? And they, I know that you know this very well, the build out of air cooled versus the liquid cooled stuff. The data center infrastructure and build out looks very different, right? Is it no impact for the hyperscalers who are in the process of building out their data centers? They have plans, right? And they have allocations of, they have certain, they have a roadmap themselves for the data center build outs, right? And the liquid cooled versus air cooled, that entails a different type of data center build out, right? So you don't see any impact there in terms of digestion.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a bit of a delay, right, in shipments, of course, so that affects them. Hyperscalers did not have every data center as liquid cooling ready.
Yeah.
So they were having to do a lot of like weird things like sidecars, which is like sticking a massive radiator next to the liquid cooled server. There is like legitimate changes to the hyperscalers roadmap, and now whether or not they uptake this new design from NVIDIA is a question, right? I think definitely the smaller guys will uptake this new design from NVIDIA in big volumes, right? Because this is a significantly better platform for them. But for the big guys, who, they're not going to change their liquid cooling plans. But they could potentially change them in the for say like their cloud customers, right? So for their internal use cases, maybe they continue to use these NVL72s, but for external use cases like renting servers, maybe they need to have something in the middle as well. So I definitely could see the hyperscalers like offering this.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And even in your report, you mentioned that the big guys will probably get priority for the GB200 NVL72s and the 32 times 2 systems, right?
Yep, exactly.
Anything else that you want to tell the world about your report? And what people are getting wrong about it, because there's a lot of weird stuff in the news cycle. What do you think is the biggest misconception?
I think like, for some reason the media or, investor crowds either want to say the sky is falling or that everything is fine and there's no impact. And the answer is just in the middle, right? And like, that's what we tried to describe in the report. Other thing is that we, I think that like the downstream implications are huge, right? Because if now all of a sudden, a million servers that are $300,000 each plus, right, or something like that, are now a completely different architecture, right? That changes everyone downstream, and so everyone in the supply chain is also scrambling. Like, hey, what's the actual volume? What are where? Who's buying what? How much am I going to have of XYZ platforms? Am I in this new one or the old one? And what's my content there? All of these things change. So,
no, that's some great reaction to how people are interpreting or seeing the incident, or I don't know if you call it incident, but the new news, I guess, right? Even though I don't think it was new news to you, because you guys have a accelerator tracker or something like that, right? A report.
Yeah. So
you were already talking about this stuff back in July, right?
So sort of we have this accelerator model where we track all the way from HBM by company, type of stack, number of layers, all this sort of stuff, allocations, all the way through to CoWoS packaging, as well as other 2.5D packaging that other companies like Amkor, ASC, Samsung, and Intel offer, allocations to everyone, packaging, sizes, yields, number of units, and then install bases that go through to companies and different types of GPUs, SKUs, etc. So we track this, and last month we updated our clients on that model, which is different from the newsletter, right? With new numbers for the NVIDIA ramp, right? Because they were different. So then in that, like, we told people about the CoWoS L issues, right? And such, and now we break out. And now, more recently there was like a big hullabaloo about, oh, things are canceled, and people were freaking out like the sky is falling. So I was like, well, no, like there's a delay, there's a new platform, here's what's happening, it's not the end of the world. And so now, like, it kind of feels like it's oscillated completely the other way. It's like, no, there's no problem at all. There's no impact. Anyone who doesn't, any delay is completely made up by people buying the old server more. And it's like, well, no, Microsoft is not going to want to buy Hopper, right? They're going to wait, which means there is less revenue for NVIDIA in a quarter, or two, right? And same applies to many customers, right? So I feel like, people just oscillated back and forth, but yeah.
Well, hopefully this discussion will help people settle into a more grounded point of view on things. But
I mean, Leonard, how many hairs would you have left if you freaked out every time Intel delayed a processor?
I would still have a lot left.
Well, if you freaked out every time they
actually, I've lost a lot of hair. This is about all I have left.
Oh, I don't know. Every time Intel delayed a processor, you freaked out and you lost a little bit of hair. I would bet you'd be a naked mole rat.
No, really? Okay.
Yeah.
No, you underestimate how much hair I used to have.
I guess so. I did. I mean, I feel like you have.
You didn't know me back then.
I feel like you have a lot of hair. Yeah. Was it like? Did you have the long down to your shoulders hair?
Used to, yeah.
Okay. You got to show me a photo of this. You got to.
I will, but it's gonna only be for you. I don't put this stuff on social. But
all right,
you know what? Okay, I'm gonna tell you what I really liked about your report, especially with people who don't go below sort of the detailed line that the clients that you oftentimes talk to and work with. I think it does a great job of helping everyone understand the portfolio, right? The Blackwell portfolio, and also some of the details that you need to know to understand and better answer the questions and concerns that are I don't think being answered people are answering very well for themselves, or and I think this is where we get into this problem of disconnected thinking around this stuff. So kudos to you and your team. It's great how you guys put all these pictures together. And what I mean by picture is just a picture of the context, but then also the analysis that you provide. So great job. It was a great read. I really enjoyed it. Got a lot out of it as well. So again, I'm a big advocate of Dylan and the work that he and his team does. So, check his stuff out if you don't already. I mean, I already think like pretty much all the semiconductor industry knows about you guys and is subscribed to your newsletter. But great job.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the compliments.
Yeah, and so one last thing before I let you go, okay? And I might even add a roast opportunity for you, but where do you think Gen AI is going to go next? I want to get into your mind. Obviously, I have my own thoughts, but what do you think is next?
I think over the next year, Gen AI will get significantly better at reasoning, specifically being able to do simple things such as what we would consider simple. Wow, these Gen AI have like tremendously amazing capabilities, but they can't do basic math, right? No. So I think that's one area where I think Gen AI will be able to reason, and logic and reasoning in the most simple terms is math. Right. Mm-hmm. That is math, right? Is logic and reasoning. And so I think that of course it'll be a path, right? It won't be an immediate thing. It'll be a sliding scale, but over time, Gen AI will get much better at logically reasoning about things, right? So creating something, checking its own work, realizing that, hey, this is not correct, reasoning about it internally before, giving a final answer. And I think that's one area where people are building towards. The major AI labs as well as some startups, but mostly the major AI labs. And I think that's where people will start to see major changes in like how, hey, oh yeah, Gen AI hallucinates. Let's use RAG. RAG actually has more hallucinations than just raw Gen AI in many cases. No. Like the reason it has hallucinations is not because you didn't put the right context into the prompt. It's because the model needs to reason, right? And the reasoning abilities come from a different number of different ways. And I think that's the big area where things will change. And that's going to obviously be very compute intensive, right? Okay.
Well, that's why when I post all the stuff on LinkedIn, you never pop up and say, hey, Leonard, you're full of it, Yeah, I agree with you. I've been telling people RAG doesn't solve anything. It does something, but it is not the solution to, it doesn't get rid of hallucinations and eliminate it. But a lot of people think it does. That's the problem. That's the talk track now, Dylan. So, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting to have it come from you, right? Because we would have a nice debate if you said something different. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think also the other thing is like, the reason why people love RAG so much is because it's something that's actually deployable by enterprises, whereas like training your own model or fine-tuning your own model is far too expensive. RAG is an experiment that, while it is somewhat expensive, is not so expensive that you can't just not do it, right? Whereas like training a model or fine-tuning a model is so much more expensive. So I think that's the other aspect of this. Also, RAG databases and vector databases and stuff, you can shove all your garbage data in there, right? No enterprise likes to hear that their data sucks, but the reality is that your data sucks. It's not structured well. There are hallucinations in it, right? Just hey, there is. They're made by people, and people make mistakes, right? And they're structured differently across different generations or different employees, so there's no consistency there, right? So then it ends up your data is pretty unstructured and bad, but RAG doesn't really get to the level where it cares about that, right? So which is why like, hey, is RAG the technique failing or is your data bad? And in many cases, it's your data is also just bad, right? And so so like enterprises don't have to deal with that difficult conversation, which is like your data sucks. And that's why Gen AI is not useful for on this data set, or fine tuning a model is not useful on this data set, or doing RAG on this data set is not useful because your data is bad. In many cases, it's the technique and algorithm, of course, right? I just want to be clear, but I think enterprises don't have to have that difficult conversation, and they can blame it on, well, it's RAG, it's early implementation, we'll get better over time, rather than like, we need to work on the data, which is hard to get an enterprise to say like, hey, number one thing to get us ready for Gen AI is actually just to hire more data scientists to make our data cleaner and better. So that when it actually comes, we can interface with it properly, not invest in a crappy demo.
Well, what I've been telling a lot of folks these days is not just we have to elevate our thinking beyond just data. It's knowledge, right? Knowledge is a different thing. And so everyone who used to do or does knowledge management consulting or is in that field knows what I'm talking about, right? It's not just data. The knowledge base has to be solid, because you can have a lot of data, a lot of content that's irrelevant or it's expired. It shouldn't be part of the corpus of knowledge. And it shouldn't be the thing that your LLM or anything else should be learning off of, and so that's the other transition in thinking that will inevitably happen probably this year, probably because I just mentioned it now. So, but
yep, makes sense.
Great perspective. Yeah, you'll probably be debating that with some people, saying, you know what, Leonard said this weird thing. I don't believe him.
I would rather just delete some of those words. Leonard weird. You happy with my roast now?
Yeah, I like it. You're so clever, but I don't know if you dropped a Buddha bomb like you did last time, but you did during the course of our conversation, which is great. So, hey, Dylan, I'm really glad that I finally got you on. It's really good. I'm really happy with the outcome of the discussion, which is my own edification, my own education. And like I said, I think you guys did a great job with that report. So kudos to you and all the team that you work with. I don't know if you want to, do a shout out to them, but I am going to ask you. So everyone, check out SemiAnalysis at www.semianalysis. Is it com or some IO?
Yeah, it's .com. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could do a shout out for the team, right? SemiAnalysis is not just me. There's like 12 of us at my company, and we are doing many different things in the space, working on all the way from manufacturing side all the way up to models. And yeah, so that's there's 12 of us across US, Japan, Taiwan, and Singapore, and France. So yeah, that's sort of a quick shout out on the company, I guess.
Okay, cool. And then can they reach out to you if they want to, bother you? And
I'm definitely not gonna. You can tweet at me. You can try adding me on LinkedIn, but I'm not responsive on LinkedIn. Too responsive. I am somewhat. But you could also reach out to like hello@semianalysis.com, right? So it doesn't go straight to my inbox. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, Dylan, everyone, thanks for listening in. Hope you enjoyed the conversation here and the knowledge sharing. Dylan, again, thanks for jumping on. It's been really good. So please subscribe to our podcast. And this one in particular, you're either watching on YouTube or not, but it will be featured on the Next Curve YouTube channel. Also, check us out. Or check the audio version out on Buzzsprout, or find us on your favorite podcast platform. We're all over the place. And also, subscribe to Next Curve Research Portal at www.next-curve.com for the tech and industry insights that matter. Dylan, thanks so much. And hopefully we'll be able to have you on again sometime in the near future.
All right. Thank you for having me, and look forward to that.